So I am about to photograph and film some gobies, which is not particularly unusual. And the thing is, I'm not near the ocean, so I'm near this little creek. This is in Valencia. This is on Negros Island, near Dumaguete, but it's uphill, it's inland from Dumaguete. And there is actually an amazing, capital letters, biodiversity of freshwater gobies here. And these are of course completely different species than the gobies we see in the ocean. The interesting thing is they do spend their early life history, their larval stage, in the ocean, and then they migrate up these creeks and they mostly feed on algae here. And you know, interesting things, the males look really different from the females. And you know, this is a really extreme environment really for a small fish to live in. So let's see if I will be successful today in finding some of these. You should also check out the article I wrote for Amazonas magazine, which just came out, about the details of the fascinating biology of these small fishes. And yeah, let's go, let's see what we see. Okay, so we're at the Ocoy River on Negros Island in the Philippines, and this is a fairly pristine little creek, and you can see that it's a fairly fast moving creek. There are waterfalls, and this is some footage, pretty cool footage in my opinion, of a waterfall from below in slow motion. So you can see the kinetic energy of the water, and this is really an issue for small fishes. So normally in the ocean, when there's a lot of current on some exposed part of a reef, there would be fewer small fish. But you know, here in this river, they are essentially devoid of much competition. So they colonize this because it's just a great habitat for them. And they get into these rivers and there are really no predators to deal with, or not many. Now you can see that we had not an easy time getting in there. Most of that little creek is pretty flat, and it's not easy to film and photograph here. And you can also see that mostly there are rocks covered in algae and there is sand, and you can also see the great number of fish and fishes. So I'll get to which species these are in a minute. And here I'm drifting along, so you can already see some of these neon colored gobies here darting around. And you can see there's another orange goby, and you know, by the fact that I'm drifting at that speed, again you can tell that this is a fairly fast moving body of water. And from that green layer on these rocks you see the algae, and these algae are goby food. So let's explore what we find there. So the first species is Stiphodon atropurpureus, and this very beautiful metallic greenish blue fish. These individuals are all males, so this is a big difference between the river gobies, which we're looking at here, and their cousins in the ocean, that there is a great deal of sexual dimorphism. So the sexes, the males and the females, look very different. And whereas in the ocean they either look the same, or maybe the dorsal fin is a bit different. So this is a female of the same species, and in fact it's really hard to keep the females of related species apart, whereas the males look very different. And here you have another species, which is Sicyopus zosterophorus, and this is a species I don't find that often. Again, this beautiful fish here is the male. So my interpretation is that the males are, you know, competing for females, and that they have to look pretty, that they have to look striking. This is like in many bird species where the males are also much more strikingly colored. You can see how flat, how shallow the these little creeks are, so that you can see the sunlight playing. There's this effect called dappling, and you know, this is actually quite challenging for the visual systems of these small fish. And you can also see how this fish here struggles to stay in place in this fast moving water which I mentioned. Now let's look at another species, which is Sicyopterus longifilis. This I've only seen a handful of times in my excursions up the river. And let's look at a little bit of behavior. So this is a goby escaping, and you can see how it bends. So this is this C-start effect which these fish show. Now, what do we have here? There is a goby which is feeding, and you can see now I've slowed down the footage. I'm showing you the footage I'm zooming in, and you can see how the specialized lips, these specialized jaws of these fish are very quickly grazing off the algae on these rocks. So this is the food source for these rivers, and this is not ever going to run out. Now, very interesting, how do they even get there? So when these fish lay eggs, the larvae actually drift downriver into the ocean, and the gobies spend their first couple of weeks in the ocean as larvae, and only at a certain point do they find a river mouth and migrate up. So this is called amphidromos, that there's an early life stage in the ocean and a later life stage in the freshwater when they're adults. So here you have two males next to each other. I believe this was not during breeding season, so they were not fighting each other. And you can see that they're almost constantly feeding. So these gobies are really, you know, they're constantly getting energy, and also when they're migrating upriver, there would constantly be food sources. You know, with this algae covering the rocks are really ubiquitous. So beautiful little fish, and I greatly enjoy checking them out. There are, however, a couple of environmental problems which these rivers experience. So you might have seen a few fish around the gobies, like in the back here, which don't even belong here. So this is a tilapia, which is an African fish. So a lot of these rivers are full of invasive species. Now, I do not have the impression that here again in the front photobombing, this is a goby, I believe. So a lot of these invasives don't seem to be competing with the gobies as so much that they're out-competing them, but here you see swordtails. There are great numbers of these invasive species in these little creeks, so they were probably released from aquaria, and that's just never a good thing. And we have to hope that the gobies nevertheless persist in the presence of really a great number of individuals of this invasive fish species. Yeah, so there is actually gravel mining. So people get sand from these rivers and river banks. I don't think that's legal under Philippine law unless you have a special permit, but you know, it is what it is. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, check out the article in Amazonas. You should subscribe to their very nice and very intelligent, informative magazine, and support the channel here. Please like, subscribe, send me super likes, and there are two really interesting books which I wrote, one about gobies, and the links of course are in the description, and see you soon.